We will get started. It is great. First, let me do some intros. My name is Michael Goldberg, and I'm the Executive Director of our Veale Institute for Entrepreneurship here at Case Western Reserve University. I'm also an Associate Professor teaching entrepreneurship in our business school, and it is great to welcome Victoria Livschitz back to campus via Zoom. Actually, I am here at ThinkBox on our 7th floor. Here's our office. And here's our moderator. We are socially distant and muting each other, but I'm pleased to be here with Josh Nagler, who is a rising sophomore, just returned to campus. And we are starting to get ready for fall classes. So we'll be together here at ThinkBox. And for those of you that are new to these sessions, and thank you for joining on LinkedIn Live, these are very interactive. Josh will sort of start off with some questions for Victoria, but we want to hear from you. And you can use the LinkedIn chat to put a question. You can raise your hand to let Josh know. And if you're on LinkedIn Live, just put a comment in the comment section, and Elizabeth and I will be checking in. We'll make sure that Josh has all your questions. So with that, let me mute myself and turn it over to Josh, who will go and lead the session today.
Hi guys, I'm Josh. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying computer science and economics, and I'll be the student moderator for this session. First of all, I just want to, when we talk to Victoria, you want to give a brief overview of your time at Case, experiences with Good Dynamics and being a serial entrepreneur, and sort of talk a little about that and your overall experience. Then we'll go from there and start having some more Q&A, hopefully get some audience questions as well. So I'd love to open up to you.
Sure. Sounds good. Can you hear me, guys? Okay, perfect. Apologize in advance if pleasure of working from home. I have a couple of dogs. They're peacefully asleep right now, but you never quite know. So thank you for having me on a call. It's a pleasure to be here today. Let's see some basic facts. I've graduated from Case in 1994 with bachelor's degree in computer science. My experience was probably very different from most of the students in a couple of different ways. So I come to United States as an immigrant, as a political refugee from Soviet Union in 1991 and enrolled in Case in 1992. And I was 20 years old. It was me, my husband, who was a Case student at the same time with me as well, and our 2.5 months old daughter. And so I was 20. I had $500 in my pocket and a two months old baby, and we left the old country on a one-way ticket. That was before internet, so you couldn't quite know, where you were going. All you knew is that, if stars align, you'll board the, Pan American flight on one end, and you'll land in a land of opportunities, and then you'll figure out what to do from there. Kind of a very, very classic, immigrant story. So we ended up landing in Cleveland, and Cleveland community sort of, sponsored and accepted us. And I needed to continue my education. I was studying mathematics in the Soviet Union, so I had 2.5 years of school there, and I decided to switch mathematics to computer science, slightly more practical degree. And so I spent about 2 years, 92, 90, 93, half of 94, 2.5 years on campus. And it was an interesting experience because not only needed to get school, but, needed to get by, needed to provide the family, needed to, spend time with the kid. And that's kind of, in interesting ways, launched my entrepreneurial career. I remember trying to get a job, and 1991 was a difficult year, economically. Country was in recession back then. And I always tried everything. And it was just very, very hard to get any kind of job. Eventually, I got a job in a dry cleaning, drying out the shorts in the back room. My husband got a job as a pizza driver. That got us by the first few months. And then we figured out there's got to be a better way. Now, we were both chess masters, and we were both chess trainers. And so it seems reasonable that maybe we could make some living teaching chess. And so we opened up what we call Livschitz Chess Academy, which at the time turned out to be one of the first professional kind of a chess schools in the Midwest. And it kind of took off. We started getting a lot of students. We started after school programs, chess educational programs in a variety of different places. We started winning state and national competitions, and the world kind of spread. And so going back to my experience at Case, I had a toddler, baby, then a toddler. And then I had a chess teaching job. I took a bunch of programming jobs on the side as well. And in the spare time from all of that, was trying to hit the classes, hit the lectures, and do what I needed to do to graduate. So not your very typical fun undergraduate experience.
Yeah, definitely. And when you opened up that chess academy, that was your first entrepreneurial experience.
That was my first entrepreneurial experience, for sure.
I guess what I want to ask about that is, like, what did you learn from this first taste of entrepreneurship, and what about that experience made you know that you wanted to do that in the future?
It was probably, transformative in many ways. But part of it is just figuring out the kind of legalities of it. How you land in a foreign country, you don't even speak language particularly well. I remember I had a student and her name was Stacy, and I kept calling her Sticky. I didn't know any better. But you learn that stuff fast. But then figuring out, what it actually means to go and open the corporation, and how do you, file for taxes, and how do you balance your company paycheck and basically your books, right? To how do you advertise, to how do you provide customer service. Those are very perennial things. They really don't change very much, whether or not you're building a tech business or you're running a lifestyle business or you're building a school. But I think even more importantly than that, I kind of learned that all that mechanics, they can be learned. That's not a barrier. If you want to go and pursue something, then you'll have to learn certain things, and that's fine. Don't be afraid of learning. Roll up your sleeves and you'll figure it out. But the more powerful lessons, I think, is that I very quickly saw the transition from an entrepreneurial idea, maybe Cleveland market can use, professional chess academy, to, well, how do you go about doing this? Well, you have to do this, this, and this. And then you go, well, let's go and execute it. And then you see the ideas materialize, and come to be. And that was just an incredible thing to kind of watch very quickly come from concept to reality, and having to go build this and go, oh, so that's how it works. If you have an idea, all you have to do is just then put the plan together and jump in and go make it happen.
Yeah, definitely. And sort of building up this, when we had our conversation, and just seeing all the different companies that you've started, Right on Track, the Chess Academy, Grid Dynamics, we talked about creating a business that's meaningful and that you're passionate about. Can you sort of elaborate on that in the entrepreneurial experience and how those type of things may have motivated you to pursue these ventures that you're working on?
Yeah, so that was definitely a very interesting experience in many ways, and seeded this idea that was guiding life somehow through my professional life so far, is that when you are you got interested in something, and then you get passionate about it, and then you crystallize idea. One of the ways to see your ideas come to life is through entrepreneurship. You basically form a company with some kind of a commercial mission around this, and you figure out how to make it work, and you figure out who your market is, and you figure out how to deliver it, how to package it all as a product. And I've started 8 companies so far, right, over the course of my life, and they were in such different industries. Chess was, of course, something very special. And it served its purpose, and we did this as long as we were going through school. But when we graduated, the professional life has started, and actually it served some goodness. Beyond that, we turned it over to a friend of ours who was a professional chess player, and he just came to this country, and he needed to to do something with his life. So we turned out just very naturally passing that practice to him. But after that, I kind of forgot about entrepreneurship for a while. We moved to Detroit. Both of us started working for Ford. I worked for Ford Research. We had 2 more kids. Kind of for a while lived a fairly classic professional life, building 2 careers, living in Detroit suburbia, growing kids. But it did not last very long, much longer than a few more years. This sense of entrepreneurship to me is very addictive because it puts you in control of your ideas, and it allows you to go and act upon your ideas. So a few years later, about 10 years later, 2003, we moved to California. I was working for Sun Microsystems. I've become a senior technologist at Sun, working on some very, very large distributed computing programs, building some very large distributed computing systems. And then one of the things that I was working for Sun in 2004, 2005 was the industry first public cloud computer. The industry might not remember that it was Sun who first commercialized the technology. It was predating Amazon by about 2 years. It was called SunGrid. It pioneered this commercial concept of selling computing cycles essentially as a utility. The pricing model was $1 per CPU per hour, right? And that was really kind of the beginning of the cloud revolution. And in building the very first cloud, we had to figure out a lot of very interesting questions. Not only how do you turn a farm of computers into essentially on-demand service offering, but what kind of applications can really take advantage of it? The applications that most of the companies and enterprises were running at the time, big Oracle databases, big SAP systems, client server computers, they didn't lend themselves very well to be just kind of picked up, thrown into the cloud, scaled as needed, right? The software wasn't designed that way. And the speed with which software releases were done at the time, you usually have a release every 6 months, and maybe like major upgrade every 2 years. But that's not what kind of the world of these dynamic services are. You want to be constantly making changes to your code. You want to be constantly and automatically and safely deploying that code. You want to be completely dynamically scaling your infrastructure if the demand hits. And then you needed software that could consume hardware cycles, and then hardware cycles should be able to be fungible in the same kind of way. And it's a completely different paradigm. Now, since I was working on these paradigms, probably earlier than anybody else in the industry, I'm sure that Amazon research team was working, in parallel with us, but we ended up launching earlier. We had to kind of figure out that they will take a very different sort of software to run on this kind of cloud systems. And it was already clear what kind of software it will be. Those were the things that are coming from open source community. Those are the things that were designed to run in memory on a NoSQL type of technologies. In a world of big data, there was already, Hadoop wasn't there yet, but we called it processing Google style. It was called MapReduce, right? The principles of MapReduce got articulated. Yahoo hasn't launched Hadoop yet, but we knew how to write this kind of distributed file systems. We knew how to write this kind of in-memory data grids. And so, come early 2006, and I kind of thought, well, the time is coming for cloud computing to kind of make its entry. And I thought that I was kind of uniquely equipped to try to help create value in this new and emerging thing. And so I said, I'll create a company. And I called it Grid Dynamics. And I told people that if I incorporated 30 days later, it would have been called Cloud Dynamics, but the word cloud got coined in 30 days. So I needed to call company something. I called it Grid Dynamics because we called these grid systems at the time, right? And the idea was, okay, I'm not going to build a product. I'm going to create a consulting company. I'm going to create an engineering company that is going to take what I know about these early designs of the clouds, and I'm going to teach a bunch of other people to do that. And then we'll become experts in building clouds. And then a lot of companies will want to figure out how to do that, and they will need help, and they can hire us. And turns out that the timing was kind of impeccable. I remember that I quit Sun on August 24th of 1994. And I started the incorporation, right? I didn't want to be tainted, so I couldn't start it before I quit the job. So I quit the job. I filed for creation of the company. It takes about 2 weeks. So by something like September 6th, I think I had the certificate of incorporation, and I picked up the phone and I started calling some of my customers. And one of my customers was VP of risk systems at PayPal. And I said, hey, you know, we were building together when he worked for Visa before, some very similar systems, you know, in-house for Visa. And I said, hey, I'm forming my own company. By the way, is your company thinking about starting to build systems like that? And he says, absolutely, you know, your timing is perfect. We are trying to figure out how to replace this, you know, massive fraud detection system that we have written in a traditional architecture with something that will be lightweight in memory and running on a type of a private cloud. Can you do that for us? And I said, sure. And on the day when I got my papers for incorporation, September 6th, I also got a check from PayPal for $500,000. And I'm holding these 2 sets of documents, and I'm like, entrepreneurship is easy. All you have to do is incorporate, make my, you know, one phone call, and somebody sends you a check for $500,000. Well, okay, now I have $500,000 in my hand. Now I need engineers, right? So that was another funny story. I'm like, okay, I need engineers. Where do I need engineers? And I remember picking up the globe, and I remember spinning the globe and kind of looking and asking a question, well, where should I build like the best engineering presence? And I have to say that I came from Soviet Union, but I was 20. My professional development was here. I always consider myself sort of a Silicon Valley person, right? You know, American engineer. And I've never worked with what today is called offshoring, right? Or you know, offshore software development. That was all very foreign to me. You know, I've never done this. All Sun technology development was done in-house, right? Globally, but in-house. But in any case, somehow my spinning of the globe and Google search led me to put in a query and ask, who is the 2006 winner of the ACM World Programming Championship? And the answer popped up that a team of students from Saratov State University in a very remote city of Russia just won the World Programming Championship. I'm like, this would be nice people that, you know, to start my company with. So I literally decide to go and find that team. And I get in contact with them, and guess what? They're hireable. So I have a PayPal check for $500,000. I get in touch with the team who just won a world championship. I'm like, guys, you want to go work for me and we're going to go build these things called cloud? They're like, sure. What is a cloud? I'm like, no worries, I'll teach you. And that's kind of how I started.
So you said you got this PayPal check, but did you ever have to go through the venture capital process, sort of fundraising, or have any experience with like, so you were able to sort of get around?
With Grid Dynamics, I did not. Turns out that I did not need to raise capital, at least not for many, many, many years. Yeah. You know, I had enough money that I could hire programmers. Mm-hmm. And, you know, by the time we ate through, you know, $500,000, I had a team of 10 or 15, and I signed a bunch of other clients. And, you know, they were paying our bills, and I was taking the money from the contracts that we were closing so I can grow more. So I actually ended up building the company without any external capital whatsoever. Now, a few years later, we have raised actually very, very, very small amount. We made one $5 million round, and then another maybe 10 or 15 right before we went public. But those were mostly for, you know, strategic reasons rather than the reasons of capital. So, now, this is not your typical entrepreneurial story, right? This is not exactly how it goes for, you know, for most people, but, you know, here you have it. That's kind of mine. And then, you know, the time was right, and the kinds of services that we were providing. First, we were very busy building the cloud. And most of our clients in the early days, they were tech companies that were going through the process of building their first cloud offerings. Our clients were Microsoft, Yahoo, Seagate, Samsung, Cisco, eBay and PayPal as tech companies who were building that infrastructure in-house. And for a while, that was kind of our forte. And then slowly but surely, cloud started to commoditize, and they became robust, and they became scalable, and they became worthy of the enterprise workloads. And by that time, maybe 3 years later, we made principled decision to get out of the business of building the clouds, because you didn't need to. They're already good enough. And then we focus 100% on really teaching the enterprises at large scale how to use the clouds. And another piece of serendipity, timing is everything. Right around from maybe 2009, big retailers finally got this massive wake-up call that they will either have to become technology companies and compete with Amazon in a .com space, or they will just be, they'll be gone. And there were enough retailers who have died, throughout from, 2000 to maybe 2009, that the writings was on the wall. And retail industry was fairly complacent with embracing .com for 15 years of the internet. But by like I said, about 2009, 2010, they finally get the message. And they said, oh shit, we gotta become a tech companies, but we can't, right? We're culturally not. So they needed to partner with somebody, and we were sort of a perfect match. And so we started building these big retailer.coms. We built Macy's.com and Kohl's.com, and then JCPenney and Marcus and Home Depot. And, that fueled a lot of our growth over, maybe the next 10 years. And so, today Grid Dynamics is a publicly traded company. Oh, there are the dogs. Sorry about that. Somebody is at the door. We went public on March 6th of this year. That's another whole amazing story because, we are going to go down in history as the last pre-COVID IPO, right? We started trading on NASDAQ on Friday, March 6th. In the 2 weeks leading to that, markets were already absolutely crazy. And there were some really crazy situations where we needed the stock market to close at a certain price point on Monday. And if it closed $50 under, then some conditions of our IPO would not be met. So we were glued to the screen, but it closed literally on that, on a dollar where it needed to close for all the conditions to be met. And then on Friday morning, we were trading, and Friday night we were celebrating, and, Monday morning, the sky fell off. And so the world has not been quite the same since that time. So that's a whole different story. But, in the world of entrepreneurship, this is all par for the course. The highs are really high and the lows are really low. And, and the process is sometimes just, incredibly unpredictable.
And clearly, when you started Grid Dynamics, you found this new wave of innovation in cloud computing. So I guess sort of building off that, where do you see Grid Dynamics going in the future? What do you see the next big wave of innovation coming in the tech industry, and how do you guys sort of keep up with it and plan to adapt?
Yeah, really, really good question. So when we started, the cloud wasn't even a thing, right? And for many years, then the cloud was starting to become a thing. And so we as a company became really good at really taking emerging technology and make it suitable for, robust Fortune 500 mission critical environments. And then, clouds became the norm, and then they became mainstream, and then someday they will be a legacy, a normal cycle. So what Grid have luckily evolved is, way beyond being a cloud company. We really always define ourselves as the sort of a cloud native, digitally native, business transformation through emerging technology company. And cloud was just first example where we cut our teeth and learn how to take emerging technology and make tremendous business impact with it. And since that time, we already seen several generations of those changes. After the cloud, we focused very much on what today is known as big data. Well, I would say that big data is fairly commoditized by now, but if you look at maybe 7 years ago, this was about where cloud computing was 15 years ago, right? So we were some of the very, very early practitioners of big data, practitioners of large-scale Hadoop, practitioners of runtime, real-time analytics, migrations of offline analytics to online analytics. And so because we, as a matter of our business models, do a lot of original research and work with these emerging technologies before anybody else does, by the time they hit mainstream, we tend to have already very mature capabilities and blueprints, which then allows us to, of course, scale when the market is ready for scaling. And then you move to something else. Actually between the clouds and big data was DevOps. DevOps really came of age around 2007, 2008. So we were one of the very, very early, DevOps expertise company and then big data expertise company. For the last 5 years, the most interesting thing that I think at the scale of about cloud computing and maybe even more is revolution of data sciences and really application of data sciences to move the world of automation from essentially rule-based and code-based to data-based and pattern-based, right, and models-based. And so about 5 years ago, we kind of postulated that while we're known as a cloud company, we really want to become as a go-to data science company and then starting building data science capabilities. And so today they're very mature within the company. Probably 2/3 of the new clients who come to Grid, they now come for data science capabilities. They kind of come for data science capabilities and then stay for big data, cloud, DevOps, right? And the rest of it. And it works nicely. We have in the data science world that's a huge technological domain. We've got, we sometimes kind of a running joke within the company that we're a little bit like Hogwarts. We have like different schools of magic, right? And we have 4 headmasters, if you will. And in each of them is a principal engineer that kind of has a certain school of data science magic. So one of them is focusing on predictive analytics and various machine learning capabilities related to that. So optimization of marketing spends, optimization of pricing strategies, those kinds of things sort of fall into that house. And then there is a house of deep learning. And you see applications such as natural language processing, various AI tools, image processing, vector search, and the like.
Definitely.
One is for certain world, the wave of technological innovation will always move on. So as long as we as a company create a business model that can harness that power of essentially cycle of innovation and evolve business processes that allow us to predict, predictably and reliably identify what is the next big thing, get experience with that next big thing, not be afraid to cannibalize the business which has matured or become a legacy, if you will, and keep moving with this front. I'm very confident that Grid is really just starting as far as its potential for success.
Okay. Very interesting. I have a few more questions, but I'd love to open it up to some of the other people.
Sure.
I know Professor Goldberg had a question, so I'll invite you to unmute.
Great. Victoria, thank you so much for joining. This is really awesome, inspiring. My first class I ever taught at Case was around immigrant entrepreneurs and their impact on Cleveland's economy. You would have been a great case study. I think there is something very special in the U.S. Entrepreneurial story that involves the sort of inspiration and the hard work of immigrants. And, it's interesting, and it's a whole nother discussion about kind of how Cleveland has lost people like you and immigrant entrepreneurs that are sort of found their way to Silicon Valley. So I look forward to having that chat with you. My question is sort of related, and it's on networking. One of the things that I've found, networking is a tough thing for any of our students to crack, whether you're a U.S. student or an international student. But I think in particular, some of our international students that sort of may be used to certain types of networking from where they're from and then come here, and it's really challenging. And, I know you've done a lot working with Daniel and Ann and other folks with folks in San Francisco. So it strikes me that you're someone that has really kind of cracked the code on networking. But I wonder if you had any insights for our students and others who are sort of watching today on kind of sort of
You have no idea.
networking?
Asking this question, you have no idea. So I'll be honest, I'm horrible at networking. I don't do that by and large. I don't have the skills. I don't have the patience. Nothing ruins my day as having to go to this obligatory event where I don't know anybody and I'm supposed to go around and either pitch or be pitched or, have a meaningless small talk. I have no patience for it, and I don't do that. And I'm actually extremely introverted. And for somebody who spent a career in Silicon Valley, I probably know least amount of people of any of my peers. So I'm actually a very bad example of this particular thing. But I do want to mention two things. So number one, you mentioned my work with Daniel and Case Think Tank. So that's one of the things that I'm involved in, and it's been very rewarding. And from what I hear, it's been impactful on Case as well. There's been a kind of a technology council, if you will, / think tank in Silicon Valley comprised of Case alumni. And I'm one of the core members in some sense, even maybe a guilty party that led to the creation of that in the first place, law of unintended consequences. But in any case, that's one of the things that I had been active in because I do think that I find that very meaningful. I find that people with already existing connections to the university, such as myself, who does not have a day-to-day ties to Case because I don't live there, right? But enjoying connecting to other Case graduates who are in Silicon Valley working here and having them Case kind of bring us all together and bring us with the mission to go help Case figure out how to be more connected with Silicon Valley. I thought it was a very good idea and it worked well. The comment that I would make to students, I'm kind of skeptical myself to how much value you could get out of networking events, but that's because I'm introvert and extroverts see the world differently and they can use it differently. But one thing that I think is super important is things like internships, things like actually working with the company, things that are actually involving the projects. To me, problem with networking is that it's extremely superficial. But collaboration that is not superficial is actually extremely helpful. So one of the things that I think students absolutely must do is that they must establish networks. They also must learn how things are done in the real world. And they also must get experience and confidence that they can actually contribute and be successful. And that's best done by doing. So I would encourage anything from entrepreneurship to just volunteering. Volunteering your time to a neighborhood startup or, some kind of a combinator, terminator. I don't know what these things are sometimes called, right? They have different names, incubators.
Accelerator, terminator, same thing. That's right, incubators. Or just open source, right? The beautiful thing about open source is that you can cut your teeth as a technologist and be part of the community. And that community is very meritocracy based and peer-to-peer. So pick a project somewhere in Apache that you want to become an expert for, start contributing, fix bugs, then make your way to core team, and you will become known, and you will get people soliciting you to come work for them, right? And you'll learn the field kind of from inside out. So I'm a big fan of learning anything by doing. So I would suggest the best way to make friends and connections is go figure out how you can go help them.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much, Victoria.
I think we have another question from Elizabeth.
Yeah, I'll just reintroduce myself real quick. I'm a rising junior at Case Western studying marketing, and I'm an intern with the Veale Institute this summer, so I'm on a lot of these calls. My question was, obviously like the tech industry is unfortunately pretty male dominated. And so as, a woman who started a business in the tech industry, have you encountered any challenges with that? Have you seen like people like underestimating you, not taking you seriously, and how have you dealt with that?
Yeah, good question. So unquestionably tech is male dominated. Most of the STEM fields are male dominated, but at the same time, it's changing very rapidly. And then also, I would say that right now we're at an interesting point. The societal awareness of this balance have reached certain critical mass. And right now, I would say that recruiters, anything from the people who are looking for the board members to staff members. There's actually a fairly significant, I would say, significant demand for, qualified women. So I think it's changed. I mean, now that awareness is much bigger than at my time. I routinely was the only woman, in a room or a class, of 50 or 100 or 200 of my peers. I personally didn't think that it was a huge inhibitor because it frankly cuts both ways. It's a little bit depends on your attitude. If you're only one of a kind, two things work. One works for you, one works against you. You're not part of the club of the majority, right? That's bad. But you stand out because you're the only one, so that's good. Whether it's asset or liability, that is more contextual. I remember one very funny story that I like to tell people. I started my career at Ford, and it was probably somewhere around year 2000, not very far ago at all. I worked in GM Tech Center. And Tech Center is a huge, like 2 miles by 2 miles, right? Huge campus. And it was built a long time ago. So there is buildings. And then like many buildings during Cold War, they have tunnels, underground tunnels that are connecting the buildings. And those tunnels are extremely useful in wintertime to get from a building to a building, right? You don't have to get out and dig your car, drive around, find a parking, make it back through the cold. These underground shortcuts are fantastic. So I would typically spend my day in GM Tech Center with 100% male colleagues. And we would spend our day going like from a meeting to a meeting to a meeting, from building to a building to a building. But here is a catch. Here's actually a question, IQ test. Here's what would happen. Me and my male colleagues would leave the room. And 5 minutes later, we had to reconvene in another room in another building. And they would use the corridor under the buildings. And I would have to exit the building, get to my car, undig it, drive, park, enter through the lobby, and get to the meeting rooms. Why? Anybody has any guesses?
It cut through the men's locker room.
There you go. Exactly. Entrance to the corridors was through the male bathroom. Believe it or not, year 2000, right?
Lucky guess.
Good one. So there's stuff like that.
Wow, yeah, that's very interesting. I guess sort of wanted to hear a little bit more about some of your other companies, other adversity you faced when starting these up, challenges, what you learned from some of those other experiences that some companies aren't Grid Dynamics, some maybe your more passion projects. I think Right on Track was one that we talked about. A little bit more on that.
Yeah, so I mentioned 8 companies. I mentioned the first one. I mentioned the one who, gone farther so far. That there were some in the middle. There's maybe 2 of them that are worth mentioning. One was a company called Veale, and I was a CEO of Grid Dynamics, founding CEO for the first 7 years, and I got the company to a certain size, and then I felt like this was no longer a good match between what I wanted to do and what the company needed. I thought there was a right founding CEO, but at the same time, we were already, 200 people and $25 million in revenue. And the kinds of things that company needed were about business process, about business maturity, about building sales and marketing operations, about scaling. And I didn't think that I had either experience or passion for doing these things. At the same time, I loved the startup phase of the company. And I was feeling like it was turning into much more of an enterprise and something that, at least where I was at that point in time in my personal life, I wanted to change. And I had a big and powerful idea that I wanted to get a shot at realizing. It was in the DevOps space. For those of you who are techie in the rooms, and you know that there is these cool things like Kubernetes and Docker, which makes deployment of systems easy. 7 years ago or 8 years ago, we didn't have anything like that. And so there was a need to figure out how to easily, essentially, containerize and automate deployment of this very complex distributed applications. And I wanted to solve that problem. And so I wanted to go and start a firm, and I did called Veale. And as part of it, I kind of prepared transition of power and hired basically a hired CEO. And at the time, Grid Dynamics, as I mentioned, I didn't raise much capital, so it was family-owned business, between me and Leonard Livschitz, my husband at the time. And we owned this, right? And then I went on and started this other company. Leonard was actually very unhappy about this, and for a long time tried to convince me not to do that. And after that, he said, "Well, how about actually, if you don't want to come run it, how about I come run it?" And I say, "Yeah, that's a great idea," because the CEO that I hired sort of really didn't work out. So we kind of found ourselves in this situation where the successor to our business proved out very quickly to be an unsuccessful CEO. At the same time, I was already committed to running my next startup, and quitting it and come back was not an option. And it was one of these very challenging and kind of difficult situations. I used to laugh that, most people are serial entrepreneurs. I'm a parallel one. Musk can pull this off. Steve Jobs could pull it off. I was struggling to pull this off. And the solution came from a place that I didn't expect at first, but it turned out to be marvelous that Leonard stepped up to become a CEO of the company, and that changed everything. And he turned out to be just a fabulous CEO, and he had taken company to the next level. But then something else very funny happened. So he's running Grid, and I'm, we're talking every day, and I'm giving him advice on the business. And to make it even more interesting, by then we split up. Right? We were no longer a couple. We actually split up. We divorced. We had 3 wonderful kids. We remained good business partners, and now we co-own Grid, right? So now he's running the Grid, and I'm running Veale. And he's calling me from time to time, and I'm giving him advice. And by the way, I'm still chairman of Grid, right? And he keeps nagging me that my priorities are misplaced, that instead of chasing this, tiny baby company with uphill battle, I should come and join his forces to help build a big one. And I'm like, well, go away, you do you, I do me, right? I'm doing this. And one day he calls me and says, "Fine, if you don't want to do this, peacefully," he says, "I'm buying your damn company." And I go, "You're doing what?" He says, "Well, I need you, and I need your team, and I need your asset to help me build Grid Dynamics. So how about, I buy Veale?" I'm like, "No, you don't." But I ended up talking to, I did have investors, because Veale was actually, VC-backed company. So I talked to the investors, I talked to customers, I talked to my partners, and everybody actually thought it was a really good idea. So I ended up saying, fine. Let's unite forces, and really let's merge, and let's make one company, and let's make it go, all the way. And we did, and it turned out to work indeed very well. Right. So these are all some very weird cases. Life is long and beautiful and completely unpredictable. If somebody would have told me, these scenarios could happen, I would say, there is absolutely no way, but they do. I always view this as adventure. Life is adventure, entrepreneurship is adventure, and you're in for a crazy, crazy ride.
Yeah, definitely. I think Daniel has a question.
Hi, Victoria. You've mentioned that you describe yourself as being shy, but actually, I think you should take credit for being the catalyst that actually established the Silicon Valley think tank. It really was your idea, and you're pushing us to connect what we're doing on campus to what the real world is doing in Silicon Valley. And that's why that happened 10 years ago. And I want to also mention that one of the outcomes of that is the creation of the new computer data science department, because it really was that group that got behind it, provided resources for it, and also really the kind of case for support for why that should happen. So what I would like to have you talk a little bit about is what you see as the impact for you of being involved with other alumni and being involved at that level with the university. And, what are you proud of? And also, what's your most recent, company that you've started, and how you kind of transitioned from tech into combining with your personal interests?
Yeah, sure, Danielle. Thank you. We really have a very special relationship with Danielle, and then I give him huge credit for creating the program and making it successful. But speaking of funny stories, so here's how this thing came about, right? And Danielle can attest that I'm not making this stuff up. I left Case and I moved with my very busy life, and I haven't been back on campus for like forever, for good 14 years or so. And then one time on one of the alumni events, somebody, could have been Annie actually, contacted me and said if I wanted to come on campus for the annual visit and also speak on one of the panels. And I have family in Cleveland, so I ended up being there this weekend, and I said sure, I'll come. And then I remember sitting in this beautiful gala dinner and not really being able to relate to sort of anything that was going on around me. We struck conversation with Daniel, and he thanked me for coming and asked what I thought about the event. And I did what I usually do, just speak my mind. and I told him, look, I live in Silicon Valley and I worry about these things like data science and cloud computing and machine learning and all these new things that are new and up and coming. And I'm sitting here amongst the Case colleagues and the things that people talk about are the same things that, they used to talk about when I was here 15 years ago. And they're not, what my life as a technologist in Silicon Valley is all about. So I don't think we have much in common. And to which Daniel just reacted in the way that I, didn't expect at all. I thought it's just a polite conversation. He's like, that's not right. He's like, we should be more up to date. Would you be interested to help us get better? And then I said, yeah, sure. Didn't think much about this, right? Another administrative person has an administrative conversation. And I thought that was the end of it. But then Daniel contacted me and said, hey, we decided we need to put together this think tank. We need to get more connected with our alumni who are creating innovation and who can help us become, better integrated and modernize ourselves, right? And I'm saying, well, that's interesting. Okay, if you really want to do this, I'll do that as well. And it really led to a creation of something very, very special when I get to meet some incredible people like Don, right? And some of the other completely remarkable people that I wouldn't have met because I had no idea that they live in Silicon Valley, that they are Case graduates. I'm very much looking forward to our, twice a year gatherings, which happened to be impactful because not only did they make a step of inviting us in, they were actually listening. And not only were they listening, they were going back and convincing people in the university to do some very radical things. I think it's just an amazing story, and I'm so proud of being able to be in small parts, somehow part of that. So thank you, Daniel.
Yeah, that's very interesting and great to hear that you have made all these connections in Silicon Valley and still being involved with the Case community. I'd like to thank you again for coming and speaking to us. This has been a great conversation, and I'm going to hand this over to Michael now.
And I didn't get to tell you about Right on Track. Give me a minute.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Give us a quick version.
Yeah, very quick version. So, my very first entrepreneurial venture was doing something that I was passionate about at the time, which is chess, right? My latest one takes me all the way to these kinds of routes. But my latest kind of, for the last few years, my big passion, my big discovery, big aha a few years ago was discovering the mountains and the wilderness and the power that it has to heal and give perspective. And so I spent a lot of time backpacking in high mountains. And I had to learn to do that in adult life. And there's a very steep barrier in learning these things. And I would say that backpacking today and going into multi-day wilderness expeditions is very like hobbyist in the niche market. But I think it has a tremendous, huge appeal to a whole lot more people that could use spending a day or two or three, in the back of the woods for any number of reasons that I won't go into right now. But it's truly healing and transformative. But I think there is a formidable barriers to consuming outdoors, if you will, in the same way as you can consume, neighborhood trails. I sort of figured out how I believe I can package that experience for consumptions of the millions. and make it kind of the part of active tourism, if you will. I'm very excited about this mission. I've started a company called Right on Track. We are still a very small startup. I'm doing it on the side of my main job, helping Grid Dynamics. I'm funding it. And we're making really good progress, launching some services and offering what I call all-inclusive backpacking vacations, where anybody who wants to, think about getting outdoors, and the COVID is really bringing something like that in the center of attention, because a lot of other means of tourism and travel and vacationing is, unfortunately, at least for the time being, is not available. And I would say probably going to be altered forever. But one of the safest things you could do is actually take your family to backcountry. So I hope to make it much more feasible than it is today, and much more enjoyable and much more readily available to everyone.
I love that story. Actually, my son was supposed to do an outward bound trip this summer to Colorado, and which included some solo, and unfortunately it was canceled.
Yeah.
It's a lot safer to be out in the woods in Colorado than it is in Cleveland, but these things happen this summer. That's awesome. Victoria, it's so great to meet you. I'm so inspired by the things that you've done. It's so great, the connectivity back to campus and the work that you're doing with Daniel. And these kind of sessions to me are just sort of another way. I mean, obviously we prefer to do these in person, but it also helps us reach a broader audience of alums that watch on, in this case, LinkedIn Live. So this is great. I really do look forward to meeting you in person, hopefully sometime soon in Cleveland.
Thank you very much. As soon as travel is allowed, I'm sure I'm going to come to Cleveland to see family, but this works too. And I want to say that anybody at any point in time wants to reach out for question or brainstorming or career advice or whatever the case might be, hit me up. And if anybody in tech or business is looking for a job, definitely hit me up.
Josh, thanks for moderating. You did an awesome job. And Victoria, it was so nice to meet you and really enjoyed your conversation today.
Thank you for having me. And Josh, you did really do a great job. Thank you.